You're throwing your life away on some ridiculous fantasy. Get out and don't come back, Patricia screamed, her face twisted with rage as she pointed toward the front door. The words hit Samantha like a physical blow, echoing through the family home in Minneapolis. She stood there in the living room, her laptop bag still slung over her shoulder, staring at the woman who had raised her, but never truly understood her. Samantha was 28 years old and had just made the mistake of telling her parents about her decision to leave her corporate accounting job to focus full-time on her online business. What she hadn't told them, what they couldn't have imagined, was that for the past 2 years and 3 months, she had been the one secretly paying their mortgage. Every month, she transferred $2,400 from her business account to their bank, making sure they never lost the house they loved so much. But standing there watching her mother's face contort with disappointment and her father's silent nod of agreement, she realized that her financial support meant nothing if they couldn't respect her choices. The irony wasn't lost on her. They were rejecting the very person who had been keeping them afloat. "Mom, if you would just listen for 1 minute," Samantha started. But Patricia cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "I don't want to hear another word about your little computer games," she spat. "You had a good job with benefits, security, a future, and you threw it all away for what? To play on the internet all day." Her father, Gerald, finally spoke up from his position by the fireplace. "Your mother's right, Samantha. This isn't what we raised you for. We expected more from you." The disappointment in his voice was worse than her mother's anger. She had always been closer to her dad, and hearing him dismiss her dreams felt like a betrayal. What made it even more painful was knowing that without her monthly payments, they would lose this house within weeks. The very roof over their heads depended on the success of the computer games they were mocking. "Fine," she said quietly, shouldering her bag more securely. "I'll go." Patricia looked surprised that she wasn't fighting back, but her expression quickly hardened again. "Good. Maybe some time on your own will help you come to your senses." As Samantha walked toward the door, she turned back one last time. "You know what, Mom? Maybe it will." There was something in her voice that made both of them pause, but they said nothing as she stepped out into the cold October evening, closing the door behind her with a finality that would soon change all their lives. Growing up in the Hale household had always been about meeting expectations. Her parents, both in their early 60s now, had built their lives around traditional ideas of success and security. Her father had worked for 35 years as an insurance claims adjuster, and her mother had been an elementary school secretary until her retirement 3 years ago. They owned a beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, complete with a well-maintained garden that was Patricia's pride and joy. What they didn't know was that their comfortable retirement was largely an illusion. Gerald's pension was smaller than they had anticipated, and Patricia's medical bills from her diabetes had eaten into their savings. Samantha discovered this by accident 2.5 years ago when she stopped by to help them with their computer and saw past due notices scattered across her father's desk. That night, she went home to her apartment and made a decision that would define their relationship for years to come. She had been building her graphic design business, Sunspire Digital, since college, working nights and weekends while maintaining her day job. The business had grown beyond her wildest expectations, bringing in nearly $8,000 a month. Setting up an anonymous monthly transfer to her parents' mortgage company seemed like the natural thing to do. She told herself she would eventually reveal the truth, but somehow the right moment never came. Maybe she enjoyed being their secret guardian angel. Or maybe she was afraid they would reject her help if they knew it came from her hobby business. Her relationship with her younger brother, Tyler, had always been complicated. At 25, he was their golden child, married to his college sweetheart, working as a high school teacher, living what their parents considered a proper, stable life. Tyler and his wife Stephanie lived in a modest apartment across town and visited every Sunday for family dinner, a tradition Samantha had participated in religiously until that night. Tyler had been supportive of her business endeavors, at least privately. He understood that she had a talent for design and marketing that went far beyond what she could express in a corporate cubicle. But he also struggled with disappointing their parents, so he rarely spoke up when they criticized her choices. The warning signs of their financial trouble had been subtle but consistent. Samantha noticed her mother buying generic groceries instead of name brands, her father mentioning that they might need to postpone their planned trip to visit her aunt in Colorado, and the way they both looked slightly stressed whenever bills came up in conversation. What she didn't anticipate was how explosive their reaction would be to her career change. She had prepared for concern, for questions about her financial stability, even for some disappointment. But she hadn't prepared for complete rejection, for being thrown out of their house like she was some kind of stranger who had violated their trust. As she drove away from their house that night, she felt a strange mixture of hurt and liberation. For the first time in years, she was free to make decisions without worrying about their approval. The first few days after leaving her parents' house passed in a blur of conflicted emotions. She threw herself into her work, completing client projects with an intensity that surprised even her. Her apartment, a cozy one-bedroom space downtown, had never felt more like a sanctuary. Without the weight of their expectations pressing down on her, she found herself more creative and productive than she had been in months. But beneath the surface, she was wrestling with a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. Every month for more than 2 years, she had carefully scheduled that automatic transfer to their mortgage company. The next payment was due in just 3 weeks, and for the first time since she had started making them, she questioned whether she should continue. On the third day after their fight, Tyler called her. His voice was cautious, almost apologetic. "Hey, Samantha. I heard about what happened with Mom and Dad," he said. "I'm sorry it went down like that." "Are you?" she asked, not trying to hide the edge in her voice. "Because you were sitting right there when Dad agreed with everything," she said. There was a long pause. "You know how they are. They just want what's best for you." "Do they?" "Because it feels like they want what's comfortable for them, not what's best for me." Tyler sighed. "Look, maybe you could come to Sunday dinner this week. Let things cool down a little." "I don't think so," she said. "Mom was pretty clear about not wanting me back. She didn't mean it like that. You know how she gets when she's upset." But Samantha wasn't ready to forgive and forget. Not this time. "Tyler, did you know that my little computer games bring in more money each month than Dad's pension?" "Really?" His surprise seemed genuine. "Really? But apparently that doesn't matter because it's not a real job." They talked for a few more minutes, but she could tell Tyler was uncomfortable with the conflict. He had always been the peacekeeper in their family, the one who smoothed over tensions and encouraged everyone to just get along. This time, though, she wasn't interested in keeping the peace. After hanging up, she sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, staring at the banking website where she managed all her business finances. The mortgage payment was scheduled to process automatically in 17 days. All she had to do was nothing, and it would go through as usual, or she could cancel it with a few clicks. The rational part of her mind argued that she shouldn't punish her parents financially just because they had hurt her feelings. But another part of her, the part that had been dismissed and undervalued for years, whispered that maybe it was time they understood exactly how much they depended on the daughter they had just thrown away. She closed the laptop without making any changes. Not yet, but for the first time since she had started those payments, the decision felt like hers to make. 2 weeks passed without any contact from her parents. She had expected at least a phone call from her father, maybe an awkward attempt at reconciliation, but there was nothing. The silence was deafening and, honestly, more hurtful than their initial reaction had been. It confirmed what she had suspected for years, that their love came with conditions, and she had failed to meet them. During this time, her business continued to thrive. She landed a major contract with Loomer Publishing, a Minneapolis-based company that needed a complete rebrand. The project was worth $15,000 and would keep her busy for the next 2 months. Ironically, It was exactly the kind of success that proved her parents wrong about her career choice. But she had no one to share it with. She did share the news with her best friend from college, Maya Rodriguez, during one of their weekly coffee dates. Maya had been watching the situation with her family unfold with a mixture of sympathy and frustration. "I still can't believe they reacted that way," Maya said, stirring her latte with more force than necessary. "You're literally living your dream and making good money doing it. What more do they want?" "They want me to be safe," Samantha replied. "They want me to have a traditional job with a traditional life path that they can understand and explain to their friends." "But you're 28 years old. When do you get to make your own choices?" Maya's indignation on her behalf was comforting, but it also highlighted how isolated she felt from her own family. Maya had been encouraging her to tell her parents about the mortgage payments for months, arguing that they deserved to know where their financial security was really coming from. "You know what I think you should do?" Maya said, leaning forward with the intensity she always brought to problem solving. "I think you should tell them about the mortgage right now, before you make any decisions about stopping the payments." "Why would I do that?" Samantha asked, though part of her was already considering it. "Because they need to understand what they're throwing away. They need to know that their successful daughter, the one they just kicked out, has been keeping them in their house." The idea was tempting, but it also felt like using money as a weapon, which wasn't who she wanted to be. Still, as the days passed and the payment date grew closer, she found herself thinking more and more about Maya's suggestion. The decision was made for her on a Thursday evening, 10 days after their fight. She was working late when her phone rang, and Tyler's name appeared on the screen. "Samantha, we need to talk," he said without preamble. His voice was strained in a way she had never heard before. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "It's about Mom and Dad. Something's happened, and I think you need to know about it." Her heart started racing. "Are they okay? Is someone hurt?" "No, nothing like that. But they got a notice from the bank today. Something about their mortgage payment being late." She felt her stomach drop. "Late? What do you mean late?" "I don't really understand at all, but Dad called me in a panic. He said the bank was threatening some kind of action if they don't catch up on their payments." The irony was almost unbearable. Here was her father asking Tyler for money to solve a problem that she had been preventing for more than 2 years. And Tyler had no idea that the person who could fix everything was the same person they had just rejected. "What did you tell him?" she asked carefully. "I told him we'd help if we could. But honestly, Samantha, we don't have that kind of money. A mortgage payment on their house has to be at least $2,000 a month. That's more than our rent." "Did he say anything else about why they might be behind on payments?" Tyler was quiet for a moment. He seemed confused about it, like he thought the payments were up to date, but the bank was saying they hadn't received anything for this month. She closed her eyes, finally understanding what had happened. In her emotional state after the fight, she had forgotten that she needed to cancel the automatic payment if she didn't want it to go through. The system had tried to process it as usual, but something had gone wrong. Maybe an issue with their account, maybe a technical glitch. Either way, the payment hadn't gone through, and now her parents were facing the consequences of their financial reality. The next morning, she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, staring at her phone. Tyler's call had kept her awake most of the night, wrestling with what felt like an impossible decision. On one hand, her parents had made it clear that they didn't want her in their lives. On the other hand, they were about to lose their home because of a situation they didn't even understand. She picked up her phone 3 times to call them directly, and 3 times she put it back down. What would she say? "Hi, Mom. I know you kicked me out, but surprise. I've been paying your mortgage for over 2 years." The conversation felt impossible to navigate. Instead, she called Tyler back. "I need you to do me a favor," she said when he answered. I need you to ask Dad some specific questions about their mortgage situation. Okay, Tyler said slowly. What kind of questions? Ask him how long they've been able to make their mortgage payments without any financial strain. Ask him if he's ever wondered how they've managed to stay current while living on just his pension and Mom's Social Security. Samantha, what are you getting at? She took a deep breath. Just ask him, Tyler, and then call me back. An hour later, her phone rang again. Samantha, Tyler's voice was strange, almost whispered. Dad said something really weird. He said they've never actually made a mortgage payment themselves. He said the bank has always told them the payments were coming from some kind of automatic system set up by the mortgage company. He thought it was part of their original loan agreement. Her heart sank. Of course, her parents hadn't questioned their good fortune. Of course, they had assumed that somehow, magically, their mortgage was just easier to manage than they had expected. Tyler, she said carefully, I need to tell you something, but you have to promise me you won't say anything to Mom and Dad until I decide what to do. What is it? I've been paying their mortgage for the past 2 years and 3 months. Every month, I transfer money from my business account to the mortgage company. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched so long that she thought the call had dropped. Tyler? You've been what? His voice was barely above a whisper. I found out they were struggling financially a few years ago, and I started making the payments anonymously. They never knew it was me. Jesus, Samantha, that's thousands of dollars. It's $57,600, to be exact. Another long silence. And you never told them? I was going to, eventually, but every time I tried to bring it up, they made some comment about my business being a hobby or a waste of time. How could I tell them that my hobby was keeping them in their house? Tyler was quiet for so long that she started to worry he had hung up on her. Tyler, I'm here. I'm just processing this. So when they kicked you out, I decided maybe it was time they understood exactly what they were rejecting. So you stopped the payments. I didn't actively stop them. I just didn't fix whatever went wrong with the automatic transfer. Samantha, they could lose the house. I know. Her voice was steadier than she felt. The question is, what am I supposed to do about that? They made it clear they don't want me in their lives. Tyler didn't have an answer for that. And honestly, neither did she. All she knew was that for the first time in years, her parents were about to learn what their lives looked like without the daughter they had taken for granted. 3 days later, the call she had been expecting finally came. It wasn't from her mother or father. It was from Tyler. And his voice carried a weight she had never heard before. Samantha, you need to know what's happening over here, he said. Dad called the bank this morning to try to figure out the payment situation, and they told him that for the past 2 years, the payments have been coming from an external account. Someone has been paying their mortgage, and that someone stopped this month. She felt her pulse quicken. What did he say? He was confused at first. Then he started trying to figure out who could have been helping them. He went through all their relatives, their friends, even wondered if there was some kind of mistake or if someone had the wrong account number. Tyler's voice dropped even lower. And Mom started crying. Not angry crying, but scared crying. I think, for the first time, they realized how close they'd been to losing everything. The image of her mother crying hit her harder than she expected. Despite everything that had happened between them, Patricia was still her mom. And knowing she was scared and confused made her chest tight. Tyler, did either of them, did they think about me at all? That's the thing, Samantha. Dad asked me if I thought you might know anything about it. He said, you've always been good with money and computers, and he wondered if you might have some insight into who could have been helping them. The irony was almost painful. Her father was asking for her help to solve a mystery that she had created. What did you tell him? I didn't know what to say. I told him I'd call you and see if you had any ideas. They both fell silent. She could hear Tyler breathing on the other end of the line, probably wrestling with the same moral dilemma that had been keeping her awake at night. "Samantha," he said finally, "you have to tell them. This isn't just about money anymore. They're terrified. They kicked me out, Tyler. Mom literally screamed at me to get out and never come back. I know, and that was wrong, but this is bigger than your fight about your job. They could lose their house. Then maybe they should have thought about that before they decided my life choices were more important than having me in their lives." Even as she said the words, they felt harsh. But she was tired of being the one who always had to be the bigger person, the one who had to swallow her pride and make the first move toward reconciliation. "I need time to think," she told Tyler. "The next payment isn't due for another 2 weeks. They're not going to be homeless tomorrow." "But Samantha." 2 weeks, Tyler. I need to figure out what I want to do." After she hung up, she sat in her apartment feeling like she was carrying the weight of her entire family's future. Part of her wanted to simply resume the payments and pretend none of this had happened. It would be easier, cleaner, and it would solve everyone's immediate problems. But another part of her, the part that had been dismissed and undervalued for years, wanted them to understand exactly what they had lost when they chose to reject her. She wanted them to know that their financial security had depended entirely on the daughter they considered a failure. The decision she made in the next 2 weeks would define their relationship forever. And for the first time in her life, that decision was entirely hers to make. 2 weeks later, her father called her directly. She let it ring 4 times before answering, her hands shaking slightly as she pressed the accept button. "Samantha." His voice was tired, defeated in a way she had never heard before. "We need to talk." "About what, Dad?" She kept her voice neutral, though her heart was racing. "About our mortgage situation. The bank says someone has been making our payments for over 2 years, and then suddenly stopped this month. Tyler said you might have some idea about who could have been helping us." The moment had finally arrived. She took a deep breath, looking out the window of her apartment at the city below. "I do have some idea," she said slowly. "In fact, I know exactly who's been making your payments." "Who?" The hope in his voice was painful to hear. "Me, Dad. I've been paying your mortgage for 2 years and 3 months. Every month, $2,400 from my business account to your mortgage company." The silence stretched so long that she thought the connection had dropped. "Dad? That's..." His voice cracked. "That's impossible. Your business is just a hobby. You don't make that kind of money. My business brings in about $8,000 a month, Dad. Those computer games Mom mocked have been keeping you in your house." She heard him put the phone down, then pick it up again. In the background, she could hear her mother asking what was wrong. "Samantha, are you telling me that all this time? All this time, the daughter you just kicked out for making irresponsible life choices has been the only reason you haven't lost your home? But why didn't you tell us?" The question she had been dreading. "Because every time I tried to talk about my business, you dismissed it. How could I tell you that my little hobby was supporting you?" Another long silence. "And when Mom told me to get out and never come back, I decided maybe it was time you learned what life looks like without the daughter you don't respect." "Samantha, please. We didn't mean..." "You did mean it, Dad. And now you're facing the consequences." The next day, both her parents showed up at her apartment building. She watched from her window as they stood outside the main entrance, her mother clutching her father's arm, both of them looking smaller and older than she remembered. They had been there for 20 minutes when she finally went downstairs. "Samantha." Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. She looked like she had been crying for days. "Please, we need to talk now." "You want to talk?" she asked, not moving from the doorway. "We made a mistake," her father said, his pride visibly crumbling. "A terrible mistake." "Which mistake?" Kicking me out or not realizing that your successful daughter was keeping you afloat? Her mother stepped forward, her hands shaking. Samantha, I was wrong about everything. Your business, your choices, the things I said to you. I was wrong. You weren't just wrong, Mom. You were cruel. You told me I was throwing my life away on fantasies while I was literally paying for your life. We didn't know, she said, tears streaming down her face. If we had known. If you had known, you would have taken my money and still looked down on how I earned it. Her father spoke up, his voice stronger now. That's not true. We would have been grateful. Would you? Or would you have felt ashamed that your daughter was supporting you? Would you have demanded I get a real job anyway? Neither of them could answer that question, and their silence told her everything she needed to know. The bank sent us a foreclosure notice, her mother said quietly. We have 30 days. That's unfortunate, she replied, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her chest. I guess you'll need to figure out a solution. She turned to go back inside, but her father's voice stopped her. Samantha, please. We're begging you. For a moment, she almost relented. But then she remembered the look of disappointment in his eyes when she told them about leaving her corporate job. Her mother's harsh words, the way they had dismissed years of her success. You made your choice, she said. Now live with it. The consequences for her parents were swift and unforgiving. Within 6 weeks, they lost the house they had lived in for 15 years. Their pride, which had seemed so important when they were rejecting her life choices, crumbled as they were forced to move into a small rental apartment on the outskirts of Minneapolis. Her father, who had always carried himself with quiet dignity, looked broken whenever she saw him around town. Her mother, who had been the social center of their neighborhood, became a recluse, too ashamed to face friends who might ask about their sudden downsizing. Tyler, caught between loyalty to their parents and understanding of her position, watched helplessly as their family disintegrated under the weight of pride and missed opportunities. As Samantha built her business into a 6-figure enterprise and moved into a beautiful downtown loft, she often reflected on the strange power of silence and consequence. Sometimes the most devastating revenge isn't what you do, it's what you choose not to do. And what that choice reveals about the people who never truly saw your worth. Hi, bestie, thank you for watching. Please subscribe and hit the notification button. Bye.